Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is David Cashman. I work with SEB Housing, and tonight is the info session for the affordable home ownership units at Autumn Heights in Rehoboth. Okay, sounds like we have a couple folks joining by way of the phone call, and we also have some folks watching via YouTube, which is great. Good to see some interest. This is a great opportunity. Purpose of this evening is to go through some of the kind of larger details of what this opportunity is, how to apply, how to be eligible, and what to expect going forward. There's, lots and lots and lots that could be talked about. I don't plan on getting into every single detail because we'd be here, all night. But what I do plan on doing is getting into the bigger, broad strokes items. And of course, this evening is for everyone who's attending. So if at any time you have questions, please feel free to stop me and ask your question. Because households are attending via different avenues, some of you are watching online and some are attending by phone. If someone asks a question, I will repeat it so that the people who are, not watching it or tuning in the same fashion you are, know what the question is. Okay. So that's it. We'll move forward. Let me just start by telling you a little bit about the units. Now, just so you know, SEB Housing is not the developer. We're not on the sales team. We're not on site. Okay. So the information that I have is what's been relayed to me by the developer. And obviously households, as they move forward, after the lottery, if they're moving forward, they get to see units and get all of the details that you'd want to have when buying a home. I can tell you now that if you haven't already, Autumn Heights already has a nice website set up. And so I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to visit the website where you can see the site plans, okay? And you can also see the different custom design homes. So typically when doing these, I would offer to, if any household had a question about wanting to see the different floor plans, I'd offer to give them my email and I could send them to them. But in this case, you don't need to. If you just go to Autumn Heights website, you can just Google it, and they have the different home types that are going to be available in this development. Now, when you go on there, you're going to see 5 different home types. Let me just make clear, and this will be also made clear in the information packet that SEB Housing puts out, which hopefully you've seen by now, but if you haven't, you should definitely give it a look. So there are 5 total home types being built there. Only 3 are going to be offered in the affordable program. Okay, the 3 that are going to be offered are the white pine. There will be 4 of those, 3 beds, 2.5 baths, 2 garage spots, over 1,800 square feet. Okay, there will be 3 of the willow variety. Those are also 3 beds, 2.5 baths, 2 garage spots, and over 1,900 square feet. And 3 of the birch variety, again, 3 beds, 2.5 baths, 2 garage spots, and over 1,900 square feet. So they're all spacious, all 3 beds, all 2.5 baths. As I understand, all have granite countertops in the kitchens and the bathrooms. They all have unfinished basements. The units are going to be ready starting in, it's new construction, so as you can understand, these things can change. But last information I had was that units will be expected in roughly, like February, March, starting to be ready, and then will be built over the course of the next approximately year and a half until all 10 are built. In total, I think there are 37 units in the development, all on their separate lots. They're all single-family homes. Okay. Before we launch into the eligibility requirements, let me just say a little bit about affordability and what that means. So Massachusetts has a pretty robust affordable housing program, and also various of the cities and towns in Massachusetts are good about promoting affordable housing and requiring that when new developments go up, there be an affordable component. When you look at the information packet, you're going to see that the affordable sales prices are all the same. Okay, so whether it's the white pine, the willow, the birch, the sales prices are the same. If you are curious, and you don't need to know this, but just so I won't spend a ton of time on it, if you're curious where that sales price comes from, like, hey, how does that get generated? It's not the developer who determines it, okay? The sales prices are calculated pursuant to a formula that the state has put out and approved. That formula takes into account area median incomes. And area median incomes are published every year, usually in April, by HUD. And then ideally, someone making the area median income isn't spending more than 30% of their pay on the cost of housing. And when you own a home, there are various costs of housing. You've obviously got your principal and interest, but you also have taxes and HOA fees and other things. So when you add all those up, ideally it shouldn't add up to more, or it doesn't add up to more than 30% of someone making 80% of the area median income. Okay, you don't need to know that, but if you're just sort of curious, like, did these affordable sales prices get pulled out of thin air? The answer is they did not. But what may be of further interest to you is that the affordable sales prices don't change based on like your income and asset picture. They are what they are. Okay. But they are also significantly less than what they would be on the market rate. Okay, I'm going to just pause for a second because one of the households is on the call, but is also watching on YouTube, and I'm getting like this pretty distracting feedback. So I'm sorry to ask, but if you're that household, could you like choose one or the other or mute it or something? Great. I'm not hearing it anymore. Thank you. Okay, so that's a little bit about what this opportunity is, the 10 different homes that will be available. Like I said, go to the Autumn Heights website. They've got some beautiful photos. It looks like construction is moving right along. They've got diagrams so you can see the different lots. I will note about that the lots are pre-selected for the affordable homes, and they're also pre-approved by the state and by the administrator for this program. And so they are interspersed throughout the development in a way that they're not clustered or all right next to each other or all the least desirable lots. Okay, it's a nice, the affordable homes are on lots that are a nice sort of representation of the lots throughout the development, and are also on various lots that will be coming online sort of intermittently over the next year and a half, 2 years. Okay, so I think probably as you're moving through this, the best way to think about it is as a two-step process. The first step is to submit a lottery application if you're interested, and then that will be followed by a lottery for households who are eligible. And then some group of those households, or all of them, depending on how many households are in the lottery, will get to move forward in the next steps of buying a home. And that's when the sales team gets involved and you go through the different steps of home buying, same as you would a market rate unit. And I'll touch on that tonight, but we'll first start with the eligibility requirements. So in broad strokes, to be eligible for this program, everyone in the household must be a first-time home buyer. There are exceptions, and I will talk in a moment about what a first-time home buyer is. Additionally, the entire household income and assets must be below the income and asset limits. As these are affordable homes, it probably comes as no surprise that there are income and asset limits. It doesn't make sense for someone who's making $1 million a year to buy an affordable home. No surprise there. Additionally, households must be pre-approved for a mortgage, and that pre-approval would need to be submitted with your application. If a household does own a home, and the only way a household could own a home now is if they're in one of the exceptions to the first-time home buyer rule, the home must be sold before closing on a unit at Autumn Heights. And then finally, all household members cannot have a financial interest in the development or be a related party. So if you are a brother, a cousin, a parent of the development team, someone on the development team, then unfortunately, unfortunately, that would disqualify you. Okay, and the reason for that is based on sort of the appearance of impropriety. So if you have questions about that, you can ask us before you go through the process of filling out an application. Be happy to talk you through it. I won't spend much more time on it this evening because it's not something that comes up a lot. But again, if you're not quite sure if you would fit the description of a related party, reach out to us. We'll be happy to talk it through with you. Okay, so let's go through those requirements in a little bit more detail. So I said that the first requirement is everyone must be a first-time home buyer. A first-time home buyer means that no one in the household has owned a home within the preceding 3 years. And it doesn't matter if you're a joint owner, it doesn't matter if you physically occupy that home. Maybe you're just on the deed to a home somewhere. You joint ownership, whatever. Those all count as home ownership, okay? Now, there are kind of three main exceptions to that rule. So if you are a displaced homemaker, that means someone who has owned a home with a partner usually, worked primarily without remuneration in the home, then that person would be fall into this exception. Now, they can't own the home. They can't continue to own the home at the time that they would purchase a unit at Autumn Heights. But if they own it now, or they owned it a year ago or 2 years ago, but they no longer do, then they would qualify for that exception. Single parent is very similar. So a person usually owned a home with a partner, spouse, and is a single parent. And it also counts if you are pregnant. Again, they would need to no longer own the home before buying a unit at Autumn Heights. If you own it at the time of application, that's okay. But at the time you go to close on a unit at Autumn Heights, you can no longer be listed on the deed. So you'd have to get off the deed, however that happens, through finalizing the divorce or getting a quitclaim deed or whatever the case may be. Probably the most common exception is for age qualified households. So if you are over the age of 50 or 55 and over, and you currently own a home or you have in the past 3 years, that wouldn't bar you under the first time home buyer rule. But as with a displaced homemaker or a single parent, you do still have to sell it before you can close on a unit at Autumn Heights. So it's okay if you own it right now, you can still apply, but if you're otherwise eligible, we'll let you know you're conditionally eligible. We'll enter you into the lottery, but you are going to have to sell that home before you can ultimately move forward. Okay. So that is the first-time home buyer rule and the three common exceptions. There are two more exceptions that virtually never come up for households that maybe owned a property that was not in compliance with state or local building codes, or a household that owned a residence not permanently affixed to a foundation as required by applicable guidelines. I don't think those come up hardly ever, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them here. In addition to everyone in the household having to be a first-time home buyer, households have to qualify within the income and asset limits. Income limits include everyone in the household, okay? And it's your gross income, it's not your net income. So when you're filling out your application, please don't make the mistake of listing what you get in after-tax dollars. It's your gross income that counts. Now, there are two exceptions to the rule that we count the income of every person in the household. We don't count the income of minors, so under the age of 18, their income doesn't count. So, if there's going to be a 15-year-old, for example, as part of the household who happens to have a job and makes some income, great for them. We're not concerned about it. Also, if you have a child who is a student, a full-time student, and they happen to also work and they have an income, then kind of a random number, but we only count per the program rules up to $480 towards the income limit. Anything above that, we don't count. The income limits, and again, if you're wondering where those come from, the income limits are as stated by HUD, right? And HUD publishes those every year, usually at the beginning of April. Rehoboth happens to be in the Providence Fall River geographic area, and there are a number of different geographic areas within the state of Massachusetts that HUD publishes income limits for. So if you happen to be poking around at different affordable housing opportunities and you see that the income limits are different and you're wondering why, it's because the income limits of the different opportunity are in a different HUD geographic zone. So, just for example, the Boston, Cambridge, Quincy area covers like 180 cities and towns. Those are the highest income limits in the state of Massachusetts. In Rehoboth, which is in Providence Fall River, the income limits are lower, okay? Income limits are tied to the number of persons in the household. So and these are throughout the, we list the income limits in the application, we list them in the info pack, they're in the ad, they're on our website. So I'm just going to kind of tell you the lowest one up to the greatest one, and you can find them in those materials. But for a household size of 1, you can make up to $48,750, and all the way up to a household size of 6 can make up to $80,750. And household sizes of 2 through 5 are in between those. Okay, and again, just look at the informational materials. You'll see the income limits are littered throughout those. Again, those are gross income limits. Those are for everyone in the household, with the 2 exceptions, right? Minors and full-time students who are dependents who have jobs. When you fill out the application, you'll see that we list a variety of different income sources that people can have. Those are the sources that the program requires us to count. And you'll see that there's a lot of them. I encourage you to, when you're going through that table, there's an income table that spans 2 pages of the application. Take your time and fill that out. There may be sources of income that you receive that you don't necessarily think of as income, but which the program says do in fact count as income. So take your time with that table. It's pretty, I don't know if it's fully exhaustive, but it has a lot, okay? Just to give you some sort of examples, I mean, probably kind of the first thing that pops to mind when people think of income is they think of what do they make at their job, and that certainly is true. But, in this day and age, people have perhaps second jobs, maybe they're self-employed, and they gain some income that way. It's, you could be receiving child support or alimony. You could be receiving Social Security. You could have a pension or retirement distributions that you receive. For something like retirement, it's the distributions. It's not the full amount that's set aside. You could be getting unemployment compensation. You could be getting periodic payments from a friend or a family member. This actually comes up with surprising frequency, and I think a lot of people are surprised when they hear it. Now, whether or not a payment, sort of a recurring gift, counts is largely dependent on the frequency that the gift is given and received. So, if someone gets money from a friend or family member once every, several months, or they get something on their birthday, and again at the holidays or something like that, that's not income, okay? But if it's, every week, yeah, that's going to be income. If it's every other week, that's still probably going to be income. If it's monthly, it's still probably going to be income. If it's every single month, going back for however many months, that counts as income. So, point is, when you're filling out the application, just, go through the income table carefully, and kind of before you check off that something's not applicable, make sure that you've given it sort of due consideration. Income, just so you know, is sort of generally counted with an eye towards what you likely be making over the next 12 months. Now, inherently, there is uncertainty there. It's impossible to say what anyone, even the most kind of, stably employed for a super long time employee, things can change, right? They can go up, they can go down. But what someone has been making is kind of usually what we're required to project that they will be making going forward, which means, if someone's making $55,000 a year and has been for the last 3 years, and says, yeah, but I'm going to make $45,000 next year, we can't just sort of accept that on face value. We're going to have to assume that you're going to continue to make $55,000 a year. The converse of that is, if you've been making $45,000 a year and you think you're going to make $55,000 next year, don't tell us you're going to definitely make $55,000 next year, because we're going to have to assume you're going to make that higher amount. So if you're making 45, just say you're going to continue to make 45. And again, this is just what the program dictates. We have to kind of factor in what someone has been making as evidence of what they will continue to make going forward. The same kind of applies if someone has sometimes people have part-time jobs, a contract job, they've had it for months, and they'll say, oh, but it's going to end in February. So really going forward, I'm not going to make any money. But unless it has ended, we have to assume that it will continue. Okay, that may seem unfair, that may seem harsh, that may seem overly restrictive, but that's what the program requires. Okay, if it has already ended, that's different. But if it's continuing at present, saying, hey, I know I have this job now, but look, in 3 months it's going to be over, we have to assume it's going to continue. Okay, that's income. There's a lot to say about income. If you have future questions, let us know. There may be additional questions as you fill out your application. That's good. There's certainly fertile ground for lots of questions, and that's what we're here for. Asset limits. So households cannot have more than $75,000 in assets, which are calculated at the time of application. Now, one pitfall that I've seen a number of households kind of, at least initially, get confused by is thinking, well, I have 90,000, but I'm going to use 20 as a down payment. So I take away the 20 and I have 70, and now I'm under the $75,000 asset cap. I understand the logic, totally reasonable. Also, not how this program allows us to look at it. Okay, so any monies you would use towards a down payment, those count. Those counted towards your asset limit. Just like income, assets are counted broadly, and there are various different sources of assets. When you fill out your lottery application, take your time going through the asset table. There may be something in there that that you're not thinking about. And I think probably the most common ones that many people think about when they think about their assets are, what do I have in my checking account? What do I have in my savings account? And those are the most obvious ones, and those certainly count. But there are other types of assets that people have. They might have mutual funds, they might have stocks, they might have bonds, they might have a retirement account. Now, the retirement account can be a little bit of a tricky one, because most of us think if you have a retirement account, yeah, but I'm not touching that for 10, 20, 30 years. So that doesn't really count, right? I mean, you're going to get penalized if you try and touch it. And so that shouldn't count. Don't disagree with the logic. That's another case where the program says to SEB, you have to count the net cash value. Someone, the fact that there's a penalty associated with trying to withdraw the money early doesn't actually mean that you cannot actually get at it. You could, okay? And so if you do have that, if you have a 401k or an IRA or some kind of retirement account, you would get a letter from the administrator saying this is the post penalty amount if this person were to try and withdraw it now early. And that post-penalty amount is what we would need to count. Okay, again, I get it that may seem overly strict or not fair, but that's what the program requires. And obviously, the biggest asset that sometimes people own is a home. Now, we've already talked about home ownership. We've talked about how you have to be a first-time home buyer, and then there are 3 exceptions to that. If you fall into one of those exceptions, great. You still have to sell the home before you can actually close on a home at this property. The amount that you would get in equity from the sale of your home is an asset that we would have to count towards the asset total. So when you're applying, we'd be obviously very interested in the appraised value of the home and how much is left on the mortgage, in trying to figure out what your equity in that home is likely to be. And obviously, if that applies to you, that's something that you should be thinking about as well in trying to determine, hey, I might qualify for this exception. I own a home, but I'm going to sell it. Well, if I'm going to make 200 grand on it, great for me, but that's going to kick you over the asset limit. Okay, so you want to be if you're in that bucket, be thinking about, what's my equity in this? Is that going to push me over the asset limit? Another thing that sometimes comes up for people is they think, well, I'm just a little bit over the asset limit, but I'm pretty well under the income limit. Can we kind of balance them and make me eligible based on that? I wish the answer was yes. Unfortunately, the answer is no. You have to qualify both ways. You have to be under the income limit, and you have to be under the asset limit. Okay. I don't see any questions so far, so I'll keep plowing ahead until someone lets me know they have a question. Okay, so we're on to kind of the third big item here, which is when you fill out a lottery application, you need to have a mortgage pre-approval. So really, if you haven't applied yet, and actually we haven't had many applications, so if you're interested in this, great. This is an awesome opportunity, and at present, if you were to submit an application and be eligible, you'd have a pretty darn good chance of being able to move forward in this process. So if you watch this, and then I would read the information packet. If you think you qualify, awesome, submit a lottery application. And with that application, you are going to need to submit a mortgage pre-approval. So there is a page in the information packet. It's page 8. where we list what the Nicole, unemployment does count towards your income, and you'll see that right in the income table. So unemployment does count. Now, I think that there are some exceptions we can grant for the federal unemployment, like during the pandemic, that we may be able to work around, but sort of your general unemployment, that does count. So, okay, yeah. So, I mean, in that case, you were, yeah. So, Nicole, what I think you should do is, let's do this. Why don't you, okay, so it's regular unemployment insurance. So that is going to count towards the income limit. But if you want to, I'll tell you this: if you want to email me, David at SEB Housing, with sort of a very, with a detailed synopsis of the amount, the type of unemployment you're getting, how much, and how that relates to the income you get from your job, I'm happy to run it by one of our application processors and try and get you a response if it looks like it's going to push you over the income limit, if that would be helpful to you in figuring out if you want to submit an application. Sometimes these, just send me an email. It's David at SEB Housing. I'd be happy to get you that information. Okay, so going back to the mortgage pre-approvals. So there are a number of different standards that have to be complied with. I recommend that when you go to get your pre-approval, I would just make a copy of this page, actually. So just take it right out of the information packet. You can just take it out, or if you can make a copy and go to a lender and show it to them. You want to go to a lender who's aware of these requirements and who's going to be able to get you a product that meets the requirements. And there are some different requirements that not all lenders can meet. So it's good to show them this up front, so that at the relevant time, if you get to move forward after the lottery, when it gets time to get a mortgage commitment, you have a lender that is going to be able to deliver. We do list one lender specifically in the information packet, as well as a website where you can find different lenders who you might consider going to. It is definitely helpful to go to a lender who's familiar with this program, because there are some very specific requirements in terms of the mortgage standards that are required. And if you go to someone who's familiar with the program, they've been through it before, they can say with more confidence if they have a product that's going to meet the requirements of the program. I also recommend bringing them a copy of the example deed rider. You can find that right on our website. You can just print it off and take it to them. They are going to become aware of it eventually, without doubt. The deed rider has a number of restrictions related to the unit and related to selling the unit. And you're going to want to make sure that any lender is aware of that deed rider up front. Okay, again, you can find that right on our website, www.sebhousing.com. And you can bring it to them at the time that you also bring the mortgage pre-approval standards in seeking your pre-approval. Okay, so that's those are the kind of three first big ticket items in terms of how to qualify for the program. Let's talk now a little bit about applying and how the lottery works. So when you fill out your application, one of the first questions is going to ask you what household type you are. And there are only three types that you can be. You can be a type 3 household, you can be a type 2 household, and you can be a type 1 household. Generally, the meaning of those corresponds to the number of bedrooms that the program says a household of that type needs. So a type 3 household is a household who the program says needs 3 bedrooms. Type 2 household is a household who needs two bedrooms, and type 1 requires only 1 bedroom. Now, the significance of this, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail soon, will be in the lottery when we create the waiting list, which determine the order of priority in moving forward. Type 3 households are going to get priority over type 2 households, who in turn will get priority over type 1 households. And it won't matter how the numbers are drawn in the lottery, that will always be the case. So even if a type 1 household is the first household that's drawn in the lottery, they're going to be behind all of the type 3 and type 2 households. So there's not, when you fill out your application, that'll be one of the first questions that you have to fill out. And it's pretty self-explanatory. We give different examples of how a type 3 household might be constituted, how a type 2 household could be constituted, and how a type 1 household could be constituted. And you'll just find the one that applies to you and check that box. And Nicole just responding to you right now. So you just check that box, okay? But if you're wondering, like, why are they asking me to say what type of household I am? What does that mean? Why am I having to check this off? The reason is because it's going to dictate the order of priority you get when we run the lottery, and the larger household types will get priority over the smaller household types. Doesn't mean if you're a smaller household type, you shouldn't apply. I'm not saying that by any stretch. It just means that you need to be aware of that priority for moving forward. Okay, so the deadline to apply for the lottery is January 6th at 2 p.m. The lottery will be held on January 19th, and we'll be doing it in the same format we're doing it right now. So you can call in and listen, or you can watch via YouTube live stream. If you submit a lottery application, and well, let me say this, most households do not submit a 100% complete lottery application on the first try. And so that's okay. If that happens, we'll let you know exactly what's missing, and with very detailed, bullet by bullet, what's missing to make your application complete. Because most households, in our experience, and not just most, the vast majority don't submit a 100% complete, I strongly recommend that if you are interested in this opportunity, get your application in as far in advance of the January 6th deadline as you can. Now, you might be saying, hey, I hear you, Dave, but I'm pretty thorough and I'm reasonably intelligent and I'm organized. I don't see why I can't submit a 100% complete application on the first try. That doesn't seem like it should be an issue for me. And that may be true, but here's the rub. Sometimes you do submit an application that in some ways does appear to be 100% complete. You submit every single thing that's listed, and it's, all your T's are crossed and all your I's are dotted. But some of the stuff that you submitted raises further questions, right? So common examples are, you submit your bank statements in your checking account. We can see the money that gets deposited once every 2 weeks. That's clearly tied to the job that you provided the pay stubs for. Great there, no problem. But then we see these other deposits into your account that are not explicable based on a job or anything else that we can see. And in today's economy, people Venmoing each other and all these other things, the various ways that money gets passed around quickly. A lot of people have deposits that aren't just from their job. Not all of them, not every single one has to be explained. I mean, the $5, $10, $20 repayments, things like that. We're not so interested in that stuff. But if there's, some more substantial deposits, a couple $100 that we see here and there, or something that's periodic, that comes in 3 times a month, we may need to ask about that. So why am I sort of rambling on about this? The point is, even for the most diligent sort of organized people, submitting a totally complete application that doesn't require any further questioning from SEB can be difficult. So get your application in early. Now, if it's not totally complete, that's fine. This is not like a one bite at the apple type of situation. So, if you, in December 20th, you think, hey, I think this thing's about 80% complete. I know I've got a couple other things I need to get done. I'd like to just get it in now to make sure that, I get some response on what I have submitted. Yeah, absolutely. Do that. It is better to do that than to wait till the, 11th hour to try and submit something that you think is totally complete. Okay. So you submit your application. We'll get back to you. If it's incomplete, we'll let you know what we need. If you're not eligible, we'll let you know you're not eligible, and we'll let you know why. If you are eligible, we'll send you a letter that has a lot of information in it, including your lottery application number. Please read that letter carefully. It's going to have, information about who you put on your application. You're going to want to make sure that that's all accurate, because remember, we are certifying the specific people in the application, and you can't just sort of mix and match later in the process. So you want to be clear and consistent about who you're applying with. It's going to have your household type and some other information in there. So you want to take a look at that and make sure it's all accurate. And you'll have your lottery application number. The lottery application number is going to be in the form of A dot blank blank blank. It'll be probably 3 numbers starting with A.001. The lottery application number has no bearing on you kind of moving forward or priority or anything like that. It is purely an anonymous identifier to be used in the lottery. So if you get lottery number A.001, please don't think like, hey, I'm a winner, I win this thing, because it doesn't mean that at all. Okay. Okay. So the lottery will be 6 p.m. on January 19th. When we do the lottery, every household's number will be placed in the lottery box. Okay, and the lottery box is really nothing fancy. It's actually got it right here. Here's the lottery box. So we put all the different households who are eligible for the lottery. We write down their numbers on note cards, and I put them all in the box, shuffle it up, and pick them out one by one, and I'll show them as I go. Now, the specific order that they're drawn is not necessarily the order that households are necessarily going to get to move forward in the next step. And the reason for that, and which we've talked a little bit now already, is because you have different household types, right? So there could be a type 1 household who is the first household drawn in the lottery, but that doesn't mean they're going to be first on the waiting list, because they're going to be behind all the type 2 and type 3 households. And similarly, there could be a type 2 household who's drawn very high up in the lottery, but they're going to get skipped over by all the type 3 households. Now, the good news is that even though you don't know what numbers mean as I'm drawing them in real time, within 2 hours of the lottery, roughly maybe 3 of the lottery drawing, I'll sort the drawing onto the waiting list according to the different priorities, and then I'll send you the waiting list. And if you have email, you'll get them that night. If you don't have email, you'll probably get them 2 days later. And the waiting list will be organized top to bottom with all the households' lottery application numbers top to bottom. So you'll be able to see you'll be able to see where you are on the waiting list. Nicole, I see your question. Let me just finish this thought. Now, one thing I want to say is, so you get the waiting list that night, and that will let you know, okay, here's where I stand. I'm first, I'm fifth, I'm 15th, whatever it is. And you'll be able to kind of get an idea of what your chances are moving forward. Now, I want to say just kind of a couple points, and then Nicole, I see your questions, and I promise I'm coming to you. One is that these lotteries are not like most lotteries. When people think of lotteries, they think of kind of winners and losers. And some people, I won the lottery or I didn't win, and then I, sulk and go home. That's not how this works. Okay. So when we do the lottery drawing, every household will have a position on a waiting list. And the waiting list is what we use just to determine sort of order of priority in moving forward. So I'll repeat, every household will have a position on the waiting list. Now, it may not be the exact position you want, but you'll have a position. Now, the other point I want to make related to that is, even if you don't have kind of your most desired position, or even if you do, that's not the end of the story, because, there's still the whole process of buying a unit and everything that goes into that. Maybe something happens with getting your mortgage commitment or what have you. Okay. So, but point is, if you don't have one of those top positions, it's not reason to necessarily think I'm never going to have an opportunity. If I'm not in the top 10, then woe is me, too bad. Oftentimes households who have high positions, things happen, people change their mind, life circumstances change. So units may become available even to households who don't have those top spots. Okay, let me pause there. So Nicole, can a lottery home in general be left for your children to inherit, or do they have to go through affordable home process as well? Yeah, so you can't leave it to your children. The idea here is, if the first person to buy an affordable home could just leave it to their children, and then the children, spend a bunch of years in it and they live it to their children, and so on and so forth, that house may never leave that family from one inheritance to the other. The other issue is, a house has to be sold to an eligible household, right? And children may or may not be eligible. And there can also be issues around if the children are minor and they can't actually take the household because they're 5 years old. If something, God forbid, were to happen to the parent. Now, could they? Now, it doesn't mean they couldn't get it, right? It doesn't mean that there's no rule that says that a child can't get the home. It just means that they would have to get it through a sort of fair process that opens it to other qualified households as well. So, you could decide, hey, I'm interested in selling the home, and a child could be the one that ends up getting it, but you can't sort of block the rest of the world out from having that opportunity. Okay, so hopefully that answers. Okay, so another question here from Nicole. How much can the HOA fee go up every year? And that's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that. That would be a better question for the sales team to direct towards them. I do recall from speaking with the developer, the HOA fees are quite low. They're only $8 a month, and they only cover the cost of road maintenance. And I believe that that was also something that was being negotiated with the town, as the town was maybe going to be responsible for it. And if that's the case, then I would have reason to believe that they wouldn't go up and possibly would even go down. I'm not positive. There may be a provision in the HOA docs that speaks to, how much they can go up, but that's a good question, and that is something you'd want to direct to the sales team after the lottery, if you need to know now, ping me in that other email and I'll see if I can find out for you. But I don't have that information. I would assume it wouldn't go up by all that much. Okay, so before kind of speaking to that question, I was just leaving off about the waiting list. And I was saying everyone will have a position on the waiting list. It might be the position you most hope for. It might not, but everyone will be on there, and you'll know where you are the night of the lottery because I'll send it to you. Okay. After the lottery, we have to send the top households to the monitoring agent, which in this case is Mass Housing, to give a final stamp of approval. Usually, vast majority of cases, we do a very thorough review and they'll say, yep, everything looks good. That household is approved to move forward. Occasionally they'll have questions. If that's the case, there might be a thing or two that we neglected to ask for. We'll let you know, and you can just, you would be required to provide that, and you'd be required to provide it in about a week. But again, that doesn't happen often. And if there is something that needs further explanation, we will certainly let you know. If you're eligible, terrific. So then we move on to kind of the next big step in the process, which is top lottery households engaging in the home buying process. And that's where kind of the developer and the sales team gets involved, and there's some additional players beyond just SEB Housing. So SEB Housing would stay involved, but sort of peripherally, because at that point you start working directly with the developer and their sales team to go through the different steps in the process, right? And those steps track, pretty closely to what would happen if you were just buying a market rate unit. So the top household on the waiting list, once they've been approved by the monitoring agent, we will send them a notice where we, put them in touch with the sales team, and everyone's kind of on the same email and put in touch to then engage in the home buying process. And usually the home buyer would have about a week to reserve the unit of their choice. Now, the nice thing is, I said sort of towards the beginning of this presentation that there were, various affordable homes on various lots within the development. If you're the top household in the lottery, when you get sent the notice about moving forward, that you're, when we put you in touch with the sales team to move forward, you can choose from any of the available lots. And that doesn't matter if it's the first one that's going to be ready, the second, the fifth, the eighth, the 10th. Okay, whatever works for you, you can select that unit. You may want some time. You may need some time. That's kind of one of the beauties of being that top household, is it's not as though there's a specific unit it's not as though there's something that says the top household gets unit, number 5, and then the next one gets unit number 7. It doesn't work like that. You actually get some choice in this, which is great. So you get choice based on, which lot you like the most, and, which unit type you like the most, and also kind of the schedule that works best for you. Once you've reserved that unit, then we move on to the next household, and they can choose from the remaining 9. And then the next household chooses from the remaining 8, and so on and so forth until all the units are reserved. When you reserve a unit, you have to put down a $500 deposit. That's refundable if you don't end up buying the unit. And then at that point, you would set a date to sign a purchase and sale agreement. Again, there's no specific rule about when that has to be. That would be part of your kind of negotiating with the sales team on a date that works for everyone. At that point, if you want to hire an attorney to get involved to represent your interest, and you should do that. Okay, you should absolutely do that. There's no rule or anything that says you can't. And in fact, it's probably a very good idea. Home purchase is, for most people, the biggest purchase they'll ever make, and having an attorney kind of help you make sure you understand all the documents, and make sure the P&S is kind of that you understand it, and your interests are contained within there, good idea. You can definitely do that. When you sign the purchase and sale, you put down a deposit, which would be 1.5% of the sales price, minus minus the $500 that you have already put down when you reserved the unit. I should note, and this is actually kind of going back to the mortgage requirements, but you can finance up to 97% of the sales price, but not more. And of the remaining 3% that's going to have to come from you, half of it has to come from your own funds. If you get help for the other half, that's okay. But point is, 1.5% of the sales price is going to have to come from you. Okay. And then once you sign a purchase and sale agreement, you'd set a date for closing and getting your mortgage commitment. Now, when you do get a mortgage commitment, usually at that point, SEB Housing would send you another note that says, okay, you need to now update your file to undergo a final review of eligibility. Now, if you're groaning at that point, we get it. Hopefully it won't be as bad as the first time when you submit all your income and asset documentation, because a lot of it we can already continue to use. That's probably a good time now to note that you do need to provide 3 years of tax returns. But those tax returns, I suppose, depending on kind of how long your home buying process spans and when you engage in it, there could be a tax return that you didn't have that you would have when you have to do your second review. But probably in most cases, the 3 prior years that you submitted with your lottery application may be the same 3 prior years when you have to update your file. So that would be an example of something where, okay, you already submitted that, you don't need to submit it a second time. But there are other things like bank statements and pay stubs that, if you submit your lottery application in January, but you're not closing on a home till October, those are going to have to be updated because they will have become stale. So point of the story is you need to maintain eligibility throughout the entire process. You have to be eligible when you apply, and you have to be eligible up through the closing on the home, which is why we do this second review of eligibility. For that reason, it is a good idea to continue to maintain a file of the documents that are going to need to be updated, like your pay stubs, okay, like bank statements. So if you keep a file and you just sort of update it, once a month, that kind of thing, then when you undergo that second review, hopefully you have all that stuff, and it's much easier. And then once you do that, and you're still eligible, hopefully, if you're the time after the lottery before your closing is probably not the best time. If your boss says, I'm going to double your salary, or maybe that's obviously a great thing, but it might make you ineligible. Okay, so you just want to kind of be wary of that, the sort of timing of changing your income and asset picture, because you do have to be eligible the whole time. But if you're eligible on the second review, that's great. You're done with us, and there aren't any kind of further reviews after that. So it's not as though once you're in the home, you're checking in periodically showing that you're still eligible. You're just done. Okay, and so you move in, and 6 months later your boss says, I want to double your income. Great, that's awesome. That's a big win. But that's after you've already closed. It's not right before you close. Okay. And that's kind of it. And hopefully you buy a home there and you love it and live there for a long time. If you do decide to sell it at some point in the future, and this is kind of related to what Nicole was asking about earlier about leaving it to a child or something, there is a process. We're not really involved with that, but the process generally involves alerting the state and the town that you're going to sell, and then they kind of step in and help facilitate a a process to find other eligible buyers, because you do have to sell it to another eligible buyer. And the reason for that is the town wants to have affordable housing, and that includes from the first eligible buyer to a subsequent buyer. Now, one thing explained in the sample deed rider, which is on our website, and we also give a synopsis of it in the information packet at the end. But there is a limit. There is a limit for how much you can resell the unit for. Okay, and that probably doesn't come as a huge surprise. Maybe it does, but this is not an opportunity where you buy a unit for 200, and I think it was $37,000, and then flip it a year later at the market rate. Okay, that's not permissible. You have to sell it at an amount where it continues to be affordable, and there's a formula for determining what that amount is. You can still realize some gain. I can't tell you exactly how much that is. It depends kind of what HUD's numbers do each year. I did see a household who bought a home about 4 years ago who was looking to resell it, and I think that per the formula, she would have been able to sell it for $40,000 more. Now, income limits have gone up a lot in the last 4 years, so I wouldn't necessarily use that as the benchmark. That's probably on the high side. But point is, it's not to say you can't realize some profit on a resale, but it's not like your home is necessarily just going to, the value is going to grow exponentially, and you can turn it into this wonderful investment where you sell it 6 months later. Okay. Let me see here. I think there's a couple questions I may have missed. So Nicole, you were saying $8 is very low. Yep, I agree. It is very low. And again, I think that was mostly just because it only covered that one thing with road maintenance. And that was it. And there was the question whether or not that might even fall to the responsibility of the town. But again, that may be something you do want to ask the developer about, because I'm not sure if there are provisions in the HOA about the amount that could go up. Bernice, I work a per diem job besides my main job. How do I calculate per month when I don't work every month? That's a good question. It may depend on how many months you work and just how infrequent it is and how often you've worked recently. I'm not sure what your I'm not sure how many months out of the last, let's say, 5 months you've worked. I think to try and give you a more accurate answer, what I would recommend is what I told Nicole earlier. That's kind of a specific question, and it's going to depend. The answers are going to depend somewhat on the details. So I think you should also email me separately. I'm just putting my email there again. And you should include, why don't you tell me in the email that you're going to send me, the details of, kind of how often, how many months out of the last 12 months have you worked, and which months those were. So why don't we start there? And that will help us kind of determine how those are likely to be counted. Okay. Okay, so I was just before that kind of talking about the resale process of the affordable unit, and that is actually kind of the last point I was going to make. I think we've kind of touched on the big points of what this opportunity is, how you can be eligible, stressing that if you're interested, get your application in early, how the lottery is going to work, how the wait list will be organized. And in the info pack, we just actually also give an example of exactly how the waiting list will be organized. And it's pretty simple. It's, type 3 households will be ahead of type 2 households, will be ahead of type 1 households. It won't matter how they're drawn in the lottery. That's how they'll be organized on the waiting list. And we talked a little bit about kind of the steps that will follow after the lottery. Are there any other questions? Any questions at all? Any questions from people on the call? Any questions from people watching via YouTube? I'm happy to try and answer them. Also, if if you don't have any questions right now, but you have questions later, you can always email us, and we'll let you know, or you can call us and we can talk you through it. That is also, perfectly fine. And again, if you submit a completed application and you're eligible, I think that there's a, pretty good chance you have a very good chance, I would say, of getting an opportunity to move forward. We don't have a ton of applications yet. And so if you get that application in, I think you have a good chance. Yeah. So the question from Nicole on YouTube is, are there still 10 homes available? Are there still 10 homes available? Yes, definitely, because we haven't even run the lottery yet. So there are definitely 10 homes available. Nobody is reserving one of these homes. No one is allowed to reserve or buy one of these homes until we've run the lottery. So the lottery is the first step. And then if you're in the lottery, then as we discussed, there are steps after the lottery of creating the waiting list and moving forward in the home buying process from there. But there are definitely still 10 homes available. Any other questions? And Bernice, I just reiterate, shoot me an email at david@SEB Housing with those specifics about your per diem job and the specific months you worked. I would say even in the last year, if you have that, and I'll get back to you. Question from Nicole, are homes going to be ready for summer 2020? I think the first home, summer 2020 already passed. I think you mean summer 2021. Spring, I think, is, they were telling me spring. But as this is new construction, and as we are still in the middle of that's okay. As we are still in the middle of a global pandemic, and I'm told that, not specifically by this team, but by other teams, that sometimes getting materials has proved difficult. There could be delays. I don't know. What I will say is when we run the lottery, I will ask the development team for an update on the construction progress, and I will be happy to update lottery households at that time so that they know. But the last I heard was the first unit would be ready roughly in the spring, and then they'd be coming online during the course of the following year and a half, I think. Any other questions? No? Okay, well, thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope that this was helpful. Like I said, if you think you're interested, take a review of the information packet, submit your application, get it in early, and we'd be excited to work with you moving forward. So thanks again, everyone, and have a great night.